starting
So
now.
who's going to ask the questions? Who have them? Can you just
I can
ask?
ask them. I have it
Okay.
up.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Um, is it recording?
Yeah, it's recording.
Okay, perfect.
Inside,
Okay,
yeah.
so this is week 4, DQ2 discussion, team discussion around current and future development in IT for transforming collaboration and communication. We have 2 questions that we need to answer. First question is, what current and future developments in IT are projected to transform team collaboration and communication? Eric, we'll start with you.
Well, we know that from before, we didn't have much of any video conferences that was available to uh, social, like in a social aspect. It was more reserved for business purposes. But as you can see now, currently, there's a lot of different companies who have developed these platforms. As we mentioned before, we're using one right now, Microsoft Teams. There's other ones that are available like Zoom. And as we see the growth in virtual team tools that are being used, we didn't see it as much as before uh, a pandemic that occurred when we had the stay home order, so on and so forth. And with that being said, it kind of like opened up the doors for us to do things remotely on a large scale, whether it be uh, work related, whether it be uh, religion related, whether it be uh, just networking in general. And so we saw the unfolding and the need and the demand for more virtual tools to be used. So at this point, we are using currently an abundance of these tools. And so moving forward, I can see that this will all change, especially with the concept of injecting face recognition uh, 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 and other furtherance of using these virtual teams, reality tools to communicate and collaborate remotely.
Cool. Lynette?
So, yeah, I totally agree with Teams. Teams is something that we've used extensively, especially in COVID and post COVID. It happened a lot for us. So that one of the other things, the collaboration tools that we use, is that a lot of things that we had where we needed to meet first with Teams and also Asana and any other collaboration tools that we've had to use to put our project and our task list, whiteboards, team, not necessarily also for just meetings, but we also have group chats and instant messaging. And so that was one of the big deals for us. So if we're working remotely, as I am working remotely right now today, then we have the teams and we also have the group chat going on at the same time. And I think that's it's fundamental because emails are I can only go so far. We've experienced that, right? When we can you can actually play cat and mouse with emails because you can send something and then just wait for a response.
Great.
But with a chat, you can that instant conversation, and I think that's so important with collaboration because without it, you have that miscommunication because he was like, okay, are they listening to me? I don't know, and until we understand how each other work, right? So for certain things, there's a no-fly day, right? There's a no-go day, and so and we learned that from yesterday was no, nope, I don't work on Sundays, and I'm here. I have certain things happen, and literally Sunday is a big heavy work day for me, right? So those are the kind of things that work out. So collaborations as it relates to synchronous and asynchronous collaboration tools are so important to make sure that we could move communication properly, and that's me.
Yeah, for me, it's this is my life. I I live where I used to experience a life where I lived wherever they paid me to live. So I've learned over the years for the vast majority of my career to depend on tools, whether it's Teams, whether it's Zoom, whether it's Blue Jeans, whatever the platform is. I've actually had to use those in order to communicate. Slack, Microsoft Teams as well for instant messaging, plus other tools that I've used across the board. That has definitely been the way I communicate. A lot of my team members not only are spread geographically across the United States, but also spread across the world. Like 9 to 9:30 this morning, I had a meeting with a colleague that is in Italy. And that was the time for him. Then I work with folks who live in India, so they're on GDC time zone. Then I have a coworker that I meet with on Wednesdays that lives in Australia. So this is what I rely on in order to communicate. And then it's the same thing for my clients. They use similar tools to communicate. One great tool that we use a lot of, we use Jira for ticketing, but we also use something called SharePoint. You guys might probably know SharePoint for document sharing and instantly updating a document and collaborating. So those are some of the tools that we have used across the board to make our lives easier from a virtual team perspective. I think the last time I've been in a non-virtual team situation was way over 14 years ago. But ever since then, for greater than 10 years ago, this has been my life where I rely on virtual tools in order to work, in order to meet with the people I need to meet with. So that's my experience. Question 2, what can organizations do to ensure that they can adapt to these changes in the future?
May I ask what type of work is that? Yeah,
so I am a software engineer. I work for Adobe.
Oh, okay.
So, and there's over 25,000 of us worldwide. So, it makes it a requirement.
There we go.
So how can we ensure that organizations adapt to this?
Well, for one, we know that it's important to have change, right? In order to be relevant as an organization, you must be open to change and innovation. And if you look at previously, some companies, I don't know, like when you're driving, you may see companies that used to be in business and no longer are in business. And in some cases, you wonder, I never knew that Sears would be going out of business, or I never knew that Toys R Us would be going out of business, or Radio Shack, so on and so forth. Now, most of these large organizations tend to do things the old way or stay stagnant or the same, and they don't adapt to the changing environment. As we mentioned earlier, that COVID played a big role in how virtual communication or teams have been used widespread beyond organizations. And those organizations who did not have the ability to adapt to that kind of like fell wayside. So in order to adapt to this changing environment in which we're using remote learning, for an example, the University of Phoenix is an online-based institute where we do a lot of collaboration, as we're doing now, with virtual teams. And I've seen the change because I went from a normal traditional style of learning, university on campus, to online. And that was a big change. I had to do everything remotely. And it kind of opened the doors for me learning more about virtual collaboration as we're doing now. So if you compare and you look at traditional universities and the online-based universities, the traditional universities kind of like shunned away from the transition. They kind of shunned away from the transition of being online. They didn't understand what that was. And so some of them now have embraced it, and you can see that almost every traditional university has adopted some form of virtual aspect or online to their university. And you hear it now, you see in the advertisements. So that's an example of using this new way of collaboration, communicating, and incorporating this virtual uh, teams aspect in the organization. So I do see a lot of organizations changing and adding that. Um, and in order to do so, you got to be open to change. And those who do are constantly thriving and staying in business, and those who don't is not. So that was just my example from what I saw or see.
Yeah. So, Eric is right. What in the Bahamas, um, we the culture here is still in person, right?
Mm.
So COVID did a whole lot to shove us out of the offices and shove us into our homes. And for a lot of companies, it was a major shell shock, right? Um, Same thing happened coming out of post COVID. There are businesses who you thought would never close. It was stalwart companies that have closed their doors and have shut it, right? Because they could not make that transition. Um, I'm in a financial industry, and so we had to make that transition. And so I think one of the things you talked about, the mindset, it has to be driven though from in our society, so much so it has to be driven from the top to go down. Leadership has to have that stakeholder engagement in there, where they make sure that they understand that innovation is important and automation is important. And so there are processes that we have done that had to have persons in the office, right? And so, I mean, we had this checklist. And just an example, we have this checklist where we have to check everything off, right? Because we have to make sure that everything is done. And we're big on checklists. And this checklist was in paper, so somebody would print this off every day. I'm a paper person, so forgive me. But we had to print this paper off, right? This big old 106-page checklist, and this had to be bindered, and that literally has to be signed off and dual signed off by persons. And so when COVID happened, it was like, what do we do? What is it? So it was like people started to freak out, right? Because it's like, okay, this checklist has to be done. It's going to be audited. Da 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 da. What do we da da da? And so it came to the point where when I first came to the company, because I transitioned a short 4 years ago there, and I realized that everything was like you had to look in somebody's face all the time, and it's like that was like too much for me. It was like, okay, we have to be able to understand that we need to not be able to depend on this building. We live in a hurricane belt. If this building goes, what happens? I'm huge on contingency. So what happens? And so I had to decided to put some things in place, and I had to do some little nudging and forcing, because when you come into an environment, especially when you have a mature environment and mature people, they kind of like sit and say, no, it's not broken, leave it alone. And so you can get that resistance to change. Yes, change is inevitable. Yes, change has to happen, but somebody can derail your initiatives if you don't have that buy-in and adoption. And that to me has to be driven down from stakeholders above. And sometimes you don't have that. And if you don't have that, that's where you see a lot of companies fail, right? Because yes, you can have people at the bottom screaming and say, we need change, we want innovation, we don't want paper, we want digital. But then they're not going to listen, because listen, this is what I want. I want this paper on my desk. I want to be able to sign off on this paper every day. So initiatives must be driven, especially in an environment that still has that bureaucracy hierarchy, right? So if you don't have that, let's say for instance you have a tech startup and everybody in the floor and everybody is gelling and jiving, then change is going to happen across the board. So it doesn't matter who initiates it, it's going to happen. But when you have somebody who is executive management, you're sitting down there, if they don't say this is the way we're going to do it. So for instance in Adobe, that's the way they're going to do it. In our company, the way that we do it is we have to have that driven down. So I do a lot in the section that I am to try to push out a lot of change and say, hey, let's try this, and hey, let's try this, and maybe we use Asana, let's use Slack, let's use all these different things. And so you have to like seed that idea inside there. And I think that's, for me, that's how you can adapt quickly.
No, I agree. I agree
Yeah.
with you. I think I always use the term industrial knowledge. There's a lot of folks that are, especially if they've been in the company for a long time, and they're the ones that you go to and say, hey, how do we do this? And they always know how you do it, because a lot of times they actually came up with the plan, right? They wrote the process, right? And I find that if you start with those people to instigate the change and make them feel like they're a part of the change, they will more likely to adapt to the change. In my experience, folks like those, if you leave them to be the last to convert, they'll be the ones holding you up, right? They'll be the ones still holding on to the old method of doing things. To pre-COVID, we used to use Blue Jeans, and we used it for years. And for even when I was a partner with Adobe, Blue Jeans was the tool they used. But for whatever reason, Microsoft decided that they no longer wants to support Blue Jeans, and then Adobe went into a full-on Microsoft Shop method. So based on contractual obligation, we couldn't use Blue Jeans anymore, as well as they didn't like the acronym that we used to call it. If you get the gist, Blue Jeans. So it was like meet me in blue and the acronym, and people would, because Adobe is known for acronyms, and depending on who you say to, they might read it the wrong way. So those were some of the things. And then they said, okay, we're going to shut down Blue Jeans. And believe me when I say that there were folks that were still using Blue Jeans after the cutoff date, right? They were still using it because that was the tool they use, and they complained about Teams, and they said, oh, this doesn't automatically fulfill, and this doesn't happen, and everything. But that also forced management to look at Teams and say, what is it that they used to get it with Blue Jeans that they no longer get with Teams? And then they went back to Microsoft and say, hey, our guys are complaining that their calendar, like the invites, they have to go two places to set this up, and they have to do all of these things. And again, because of the collaboration with Microsoft said, okay, we can make those changes. That was in our queue to make. We'll just fast track them for you guys to get better access to it, right? And it's in making those pivots that folks, obviously we did shut it off eventually, right? But there were still folks that held on for as long as possible because that was the tool they were most comfortable using. So in my experience, if you get the feedback and the collaboration from what we call people at the bottom, they will more likely adapt versus feeling like it's being pushed down their throat. Like, you need to do this and you need to do it now and you have to do it by this date or we're going to shut it off. They're the ones who are more likely to fight that change. And unfortunately, if you don't get their buy-in, depending on where they are, they could actually fully sabotage the entire conversion, right? So that's my way of, and of course training, right? You can't just say you need to learn this and you don't offer training or the ability to train, some form of incentive for training. One of the incentives we're running for us right now is you must have at least one certification by the end of the year. And the year for us is the fiscal year ends the end of November. So you should see people over here scrambling. Like, if they don't have a certification, and it's not like a degree, it's a certification, whether it's a certification in an Adobe product or a certification in an external product, whatever it is, you have to get that done by the end of the year. And I'm telling you, people are over here scrambling. But then what they did was, depending on the product you got certified in, they gave you, I think it's like anywhere from a $500 to a $3,000 bonus to incentivize you to get it done. They give you paid time to study. So they call it self-enablement. So you take the time to prepare for it. You put your time in that you're taking to prepare for it. You're getting paid for it. So you're not losing time on your paycheck or anything like that to get it done, because at the end of the day, they're going to market it and say, we have this many people certified in these many products, right? So for the company wise, it's a big deal. They make money off of it. So incentivizing us a couple $100 to get it done, they're winning at the end of the day, right? So some of those things companies can look into to get people to adapt quicker, and also not only adapt, because I don't want you to just adapt to say, oh, I'm doing it. I want you to fully acclimate to it and consistently use it, versus saying, yeah, I used it once. No, I need this to be your lifestyle. So that's my experience of the things that can be done to push this forward. I think that covers DQ2.
Yeah.
Yes.
Do we need to add anything else? Okay. So Lynette, if you can
we can stop.
Stop the recording.
Okay. Just give me 1 second. Stop recording.